For me, it's very much a case of I like your old stuff better than your new stuff.
Being a supercar, sort of, you would expect the parts and maintenance to be expensive, right? Well, have I got something for you?
Look, if you're an Audi fan watching this, you're gonna hate what I'm about to say. Okay, you know what is incredibly tempting? You can potentially have a proper mid-engined German-built supercar for less money than what a brand new BMW M2 is asking. Even if you want the sensational V10 engine as well, you can have that for potentially less than what a brand new BMW M4 is asking. However, before you go rushing out to buy one, like any serious performance car, there is so much you need to watch out for. So how about we take you through all the common complaints and faults, show you how they're aging and what they're like to drive and live with now that they're over 10 years old, and finally answer the big question, should you buy a used Audi R8? First of all though, there is some critical stuff that you need to know. As you're probably aware, thanks to Volkswagen owning both Audi and Lamborghini, the first generation Audi R8 shares a host of componentry with the Giotto. Not to mention the Italians had a substantial hand when it came to development and all of the calibrations. Initially, the R8 was armed with a 4.2 litre V8, an extremely close relative to the power plant found in the B7 RS4, sending power to all four wheels via either a fabulous 6-speed manual or a less convincing 6-speed automated single clutch R-tronic auto. Then in 2009, the R8 entered the very seriously big leagues thanks to the inclusion of a 5.2 litre V10. And while this engine is nearly identical to what you'll find lurking in the back of a Lamborghini Giotto LP564, it was detuned because, heaven forbid, Volkswagen let their more conservative R8 supercar match or potentially outshine their flamboyant Italian cousin. From 2010, drop-top variants joined the lineup. However, in 2013, the range received quite the update. Gone was the clunky old R-tronic transmission replaced by this S-tronic, as well as the car receiving a whole bunch of other updates and extra inclusions. Interestingly, the LED headlights fitted to the updated cars were some of the very first fitted to any production car ever. While the 2013 update is regarded as the most substantial, Audi subtly improved the R8 almost every year of its production cycle, including adding more features and optional extras. Plus, if you live here in Australia and you're happy to dig into your wallet with a lot more enthusiasm, pre-update R8s are also available as a carbon edition or the very limited GT spec. That is if you can find one on the used market. They're very rare, only 333 were ever produced. Post-update, you can try to find a V10 Plus or an LMX, although only 99 LMXs were ever produced, plus the carbon edition returned to the range. However, internationally, well, your selection of special editions blows us out of the water. But where the R8 really starts to become tempting is in what they cost. Early high kilometer V8s, they're kicking off currently from around about $100,000, V10s from about 150 grand. And ignoring the really special edition sort of stuff, pricing currently tops out at around about 200,000 bucks. And look, obviously that is still a boatload of cash, but we are talking seriously mint condition low kilometer examples. And remember, that's still potentially less than a 2023 Porsche 718 GTS. And speaking of the competition, if you want all-wheel drive, serious performance, and all of the theatre that comes with something like this, you really only have three other options. The twin under-the-skin Lamborghini Giotto, the brutally effective yet maybe a little predictable Porsche 911 997 Turbo, and the upstart wildcard, the Nissan R35 GTR. And look, obviously if you open up the criteria to rear-wheel drive cars as well, there's a whole host of other options. But no matter what car you're looking at buying, especially in this sort of price range, it's critical that you get the best possible finance deal. Make sure you hit the driver link below because they will compare finance packages from loads of different lenders, so you know you're going to get the very best possible deal. Plus, there are no hidden fees, the entire process is done easily online, and you can get pre-approval in just no time. Honestly, the service that Driver provides is utterly brilliant. Speaking of brilliant, let's talk about the looks. Walter De Silva, well done good sir, you have designed a phenomenal looking car. I love the way these look. In fact, I think they're actually getting better with age. A bit like Brad Pitt. And even when you compare it to the more recent generation of R8, for me, it's very much a case of, I like your old stuff better than your new stuff. For me, it's like perfect car design. The problem I have with the second generation R8 is that it looks a bit like the original, but the video buffering speed has dropped down to about 240p, so it kind of looks like the original, just nowhere near as convincing. Although, I might have a controversial opinion, I prefer the V8 blades over the V10 blades. I get why they've made the V8 one stick out further, but just for me, I think the V8, it just looks a bit more cohesive. However, unfortunately, all is not fabulous news for the R8. Yes, the sexy looks are amazing, but This sexy exterior, it might be hiding a few gremlins. First of all, and actually speaking of the blades, used examples are becoming a little bit notorious for this leading edge to become chipped. Actually, the same can be said for pretty much the entire front of the car, and the same can be said for the bottoms of the doors and around the rear wheel arches. If you are in the market for one of these, just check the entire car for any signs of bubbling or peeling paint, because a full respray will cost all of the thousands of dollars. Also, make sure you check all of the panel gaps around the entire car, especially around the huge clamshell bonnet. These things are notoriously hard to realign. You need to know if it has been off, why has it been off. Also, check down here for any signs of missing paint, because they can start to oxidize there. That means you've got to repaint the entire clamshell, and yeah, bloody expensive. Okay, next up, check that the fog light actually works. The actual placement of it and design, it's really vulnerable to having water get in there. Water gets in the bulb holder and eventually corrodes it and shorts it out. It's not a major issue to fix, just make sure it works. Now, you may have heard some horror stories about the frame cracking, and yeah, this sounds completely catastrophic. Don't worry about it, it's not a big thing. The R8 specialist that we spoke to mentioned that it only really affects the early cars, and even then, those cars have had a massive accident or hit something like a gutter full on. Also, Audi fixed the issue from 2011 onwards. Not that it was an issue at all. You're not gonna have a problem, just ignore that. However, something you can't ignore is the issues with the mag ride suspension. Yes, this is fantastic when it works, not so much when it doesn't. The problem is, when we spoke to the R8 specialists and owners, they all mentioned that it's a case of when it breaks, not if it breaks. Now, you can fix this by replacing the suspension with OEM components. However, you're probably just going to have the same problems down the track, plus the OEM components are eye-wateringly expensive. You can ship them off to Poland to get fixed. The problem here is once you add the shipping cost and the waiting time and all that sort of stuff, it's still expensive and bloody annoying. What most of the specialists recommend doing is just ditching the OEM setup and fitting a really premium set of passive struts. With how good passive premium suspension is these days, chances are it's going to offer better ride and handling anyway. And while we're down here, we need to talk about the brakes. This is a serious performance car. It needs serious performance quality brakes, which yeah, they come at an eye-watering cost if you're looking at the OEM replacements. We'd normally recommend checking out some aftermarket brakes, but you've got to remember, these OEM brakes, they were designed to provide maximum stopping power while still being usable every day. The problem with so many of the aftermarket options is that, yeah, they're going to stop you like you've run into a brick wall, but at the same time, they're just going to squeak like crazy. And look, yes, you can also fit Brembo's economy line of brakes, but if you're looking at driving the car in the way it was intended, shouldn't stopping power trump saving money? Look, overall with the brakes, just spend the money and stick with the OEM stuff. You'll thank me later. And look, obviously the same goes for the tires. Spend the money and get really high quality rubber. If you're looking at one of these and the tires all mismatch, or there's some economy range of tire, not a good sign. Shows that the owner has been cutting costs, and that's not good when it comes to an R8. Also on the subject of previous owners, you need to find out as much as you can about how the previous owners cared for the car. With something like this, you have to get a pre-purchase inspection, and make sure you also get a vehicle history check. That will tell you if there's any money owing on the car, if it's been stolen, if it's been written off, and to get one, head to ReDriven.com or click the link below. Okay, now to common complaints and issues inside, and the big one we uncovered through all of the owners was just how shit the standard infotainment system is. Unfortunately, these fall into that horrible period where premium cars had to have a screen of some sort, but at the same time, the technology wasn't quite there yet, so they're just utter rubbish. Plus, plenty of owners have had issues with the standard system dropping out, screens locking up, connectivity being an absolute nightmare. They're just terrible. Now, the good news here is that there are plenty of great aftermarket systems that will update this. Plus, it means you then get Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, all the modern connectivity features. However, make sure you use really high quality equipment, because Alex and Sasha that own this car, this has an aftermarket head unit and they've had a whole bunch of issues with it. Just use quality premium stuff. It's a premium car. Next up, a few owners mentioned that the side bolsters on the entry sides of the seats, they can get a bit overly squishy, lose their shape, obviously because you've got to pull some pretty fantastic shapes to get in and out of this. Also, the leather on the base of the seats, especially on some of the earlier models, it can start to get a little bit loose. These are easily fixed. Go to a really high quality upholsterer, they'll fix it straight up. Next up, being a Volkswagen, sorry, Audi of this generation, the HVAC or air conditioning system is known to have a few issues. In fact, the air conditioning switch itself, it can fail, and apparently the replacement part is bloody expensive. Also, a few owners have had issues with their air conditioning compressors and heater valves. So if you are in the market for one of these, try the aircon and the heating in all of its different settings, make sure it works. If it doesn't, you might want to get that wallet warmed up. Now, interestingly, unlike a whole bunch of other Volkswagens and Audis of this generation, these don't seem to suffer from the same huge amount of weird sporadic electronic gremlins that they can. Things like power mirrors, power windows, door lock actuators, the power adjustments for the seats. On these, they all seem to be pretty resilient. Now, speaking of resilience, how's the wear and tear in an R8? Look, obviously every example is going to differ from car to car. In this one, it's got nearly 40,000 kilometers on it. It is used on a pretty regular basis. Excellent for wear and tear. The leather, still super supple. Obviously, you've got your little scuff marks around the doors and the door entries from where your feet scrub when you get in and out. That's to be expected. There's a couple little tiny scratches and little bits of paint kind of going funny here and there, but not at all a problem. It still feels completely premium. A solid detail, and this thing I think would look pretty much brand new. Actually, just on that, when you read through the owners groups and forums, plenty of owners that have also owned a whole bunch of other premium cars really compliment the R8 for how resilient these interiors are. And that also goes for the amount of rattles and squeaks and weird sounds you'll get. In a lot of some of the Italian supercars, they can get pretty rattly once you get a few kilometers on the clock, but with these, yeah, they apparently sound as tight as a drum. Actually, just on the owners groups and the forums, a massive thank you to everyone that helped us research this video, especially the guys at RE Performance UK. That's a YouTube channel and an R8 specialist. Phenomenal advice. We read through all of their articles and watched all their videos when researching this. Brilliant. Now, elsewhere in this interior, let's talk design for a second. A few people complain that they feel this interior is just a bit too conservative for a supercar. I completely disagree. I love the fact that it leans into cool sophistication more than just being flamboyant and garish. And even from just purely a design aspect, I think, like the exterior, the interior is aging so gracefully. And also with the huge amount of options that you could select with these when they were brand new, depending on how the original owner spec'd it, the interiors can feel and look quite different. Also, if you want to customize a used R8 to your heart's desire, well, plenty of the optional trim pieces like carbon fiber and Alcantara pieces, they are available still from Audi at a hugely premium price. There are also aftermarket manufacturers that make a whole bunch of different accessories for them. But again, please spend money and get premium products, because I've seen a few with dodgy aftermarket carbon fiber trim pieces and they just look cheap and tacky. Now, as far as actually using this interior, I'm exactly 5 centimeters taller than celebrity R8 driver and king of style, Harry Styles. This is my driving position. And like so many Volkswagens and Audis, the driving position is absolutely perfection. Even these seats, these are just the standard seats and they're super comfortable yet still super supportive. Brilliant. In saying that, the last R8 I drove had the optional Recaro style winged, almost racing bucket seats. For me, they're still the pick. Now, as far as practicality goes, you've got a pretty rubbish sized glove box there. You've got a spot kind of sort of for your phone there, kind of just going to fall out as soon as you go around a corner. There is an ashtray and a cigarette lighter. Disappointing. 3 cup holders, one of which is perfectly sized for small pretentious coffees like the ones I drink, like a double ristretto. Little cubby bin just here. Stupidly small door bins here, and it's really hard to get to as well. And also a pretty decent amount of space behind the front seats. Not that there are any back seats. In terms of what stuff you're going to get as standard, obviously climate control, rear view camera, power, pretty much everything, and obviously all the stuff that you would expect. But try and find an example with the optional Bang & Olufsen sound system, because it sounds incredible. Now, before we go on, we have to say a massive, massive thank you to Sasha and Alex for lending us the R8. You guys are absolute legends. As a thank you present, you're going to be going home with a free set of these bad boys. Now, if you want a set of WiperTech wiper blades, and you do because they are some of the best wiper blades money can buy, they're super easy to order online and they're delivered straight to your door. If you hit the link below, you're going to get 15% off and free express shipping. And if you happen to have a cool car that you want to lend us for a video, you'll end up getting another set for free. Now, in terms of practicality in the front, interesting fact, this actually has 5 litres less cargo space than the front of a 997 Turbo, and it also doesn't have a back seat. So I'm sorry, but in terms of overall practicality, the Porsche wins. Now, in terms of safety features, look, obviously all-wheel drive, huge brakes and wide tyres will do their best to keep you on the road at all times. But what happens when physics takes over? Well, to take you through what safety features you can expect, it does seem only right that we do this in the most German way we possibly can.
Keeping you safe in CR8, you will have 4 airbags, anti-lock brakes, electronic brake force distribution, brake assist, electronic stability and traction control, and seat belts.
Now look, obviously we don't expect you to remember all of these features and the lists of everything that goes wrong, but to make a really easy reference point, go to redriven.com and check out the free R8 cheat sheet. It's basically the ultimate used R8 buyer's guide. Okay, common complaints and issues when it comes to driving these. All right, personally, I would have preferred this to be a manual transmission. Luckily, it is the post-update dual clutch transmission because plenty that have driven the old R-Tronic have been less than complimentary about it. However, the problem here, I think, is that people expect the old R-Tronic to behave like a modern dual clutch transmission. And of course it won't, because it is a completely different style of setup. And also, according to those that appreciate the R-Tronic, or E-gear, the way Lamborghini call it, if you drive to the transmission's strengths and maybe adjust your driving style a little bit, they think it's a fantastic transmission. In fact, they feel that because it feels a bit more old school, it's actually a more engaging thing to drive. And besides that, any other complaints about the driving experience? No. This is an utterly wonderful car to drive. Actually, you know what? If you're a fan or if you own a second generation R8, you're gonna hate what I'm about to say, but this thing to drive is better in every way, in every scenario. In fact, look, I've been so fortunate to drive a whole bunch of R8s. In fact, I had a second gen 2019 example as a press car for a little while. And like, sure, it was faster and it was newer, but who cares? Because honestly, this is better. I remember expecting so much from that car. And look, at the risk of sounding like a complete wanker, I was just left really disappointed. The steering was so light and lifeless, and it was so incredibly well refined that I feel like it didn't really have any character. And look, obviously it was bloody quick and it sounded amazing when you were way high up in the rev range, but you only get to enjoy that sort of stuff very occasionally. This, however, first of all, the steering. Oh my God, it is so good. Even just pulling into a car parking space, it makes you feel involved. And the whole car, it feels so much more raw. Like there's nowhere near the same levels of refinement, but isn't that what you want from a car like this? Look, don't get me wrong, we're not talking Ferrari F40 or Lotus Exige levels of raw. This is still totally usable on a daily basis, but because it's visceral, it just draws you into the driving experience all the time. And then when you do have the opportunity to get up and have some fun, it makes you feel like an integral cog in the machine. It makes you feel like a driving god. And then with this earlier generation, you just hear more of the engine more of the time. And it's naturally aspirated V10, and it's this V10. Engines don't sound much better than this. Look, if you're an Audi fan watching this, you're gonna hate what I'm about to say, but about the biggest compliment I can pay this car is that it doesn't feel anything like driving an Audi at all. It feels so much more special than that. But look, surely it can't all be fantastic news. Mechanically, what's the story here? What goes wrong with them? I'm sorry, I can't tell you because I'm not a qualified mechanic. You know who is? It's Jim.
I'll start with the V8. Look, actually remarkably stout. Typical Volkswagen though, they do suffer from coil and injectors, which causes misfires, but no worse than any other Volkswagen. Oil leaks, look, the valve covers often leak on these. You can change the gasket on the right-hand side, pretty straightforward, but it's recommended if it's leaking on the left-hand side, you replace the whole valve cover because it's got an integrated PCV, which is also problematic. Coolant leaks, they're not too bad, although the expansion tank is really weak and it is prone to just spontaneously splitting open. Audi do have a strap you can retrofit to hold that together. It doesn't stop the leaks though, it just stops the spontaneous explosion. These things have direct injection only now, and they are terribly prone to getting clogged up inlet ports, which can just steal the valuable horsepower. It's done to meet emission standards, and there's the way the breather system's designed, and there's some clever camshaft trickery which sort of exacerbates the problem. They just choke up, and when they do, they most certainly don't meet those emission standards. So you're going to want to get that media blasted, like walnut blasted every few years really to keep it clean. The ball joints on the early V8s, well, Audi don't make them anymore. There are some companies that can sort of rebuild them or recondition them, but if you can't get that, you have to upgrade the whole suspension arm and the hub setup so it's the same as the later model V10, which is eye-wateringly expensive. If you're looking to buy one or if you own one, just check that the release cable for the front trunk actually does work and it is there. If the battery should go flat in these, you can't open that without that, and it's a common problem. Now the V10, look, also remarkably good. There are a few reports of catastrophic engine failure. Yes, that happens, but actually mainly to ones that are heavily modified. If they're standard, they are actually very reliable. Yes, they can have some oil leaks. The dry sump supply and return lines, they can be an issue actually in wet climates. Those pipes can corrode from the outside in and you can end up with leaks, and they can also rub through on their insulation and their mounting points and cause leaks there as well. Underneath the car, right up in the transmission tunnel, under all the covers, there's a heater valve which controls the flow of coolant to the heater. It has it fails occasionally. All heater taps do occasionally, but on these, it's about $1,000 round trip to replace it. Pretty common problem too. Now, I know Adam already mentioned this, but the mag ride suspension in these, look, it is utter crap and fails often and is really expensive to repair. Most people just replace it with a passive style coilover suspension. There's plenty of options out there, way cheaper and way more reliable. The AC compressor failing on these, yeah, it's a pretty common problem on both the V10s and the V8s. But to replace it on the V8, it's way more labour intensive and expensive. Some say you've got to pull the whole engine out to do it. That is not really the case. If you've got the right tools and some triple jointed limbs, you can get the AC compressor out without taking the engine out. It is a massive pain in the arse and takes forever, but you can do it. The transmissions in these, overall pretty good. If they've not been serviced properly or if they've got really higher mileage on them, they can get a bit of gear roll, a bit of a rattle in the gears when the car is idling, and you can hear that from the back of the car. It very rarely manifests into an issue, and you can make it much quieter just by putting a thicker oil, like a 75-140 oil in there, and that does help. And the dual clutch transmissions on the post-updated model look like any dual clutch. They're okay if they're maintained. If they do have a problem though, they are very expensive to fix. Speaking of expensive, I'm just going to loop back to the V8 here. I was doing some research on these, and the inlet manifold on these, which is a plastic inlet manifold and it does have a few moving parts, and it looks a little bit like two EA888 manifolds together, right, to give you an idea. And you can buy one of those manifolds for EA888 for, I don't know, a couple of grand at the very most. For the V8 manifold, wait for it, $23,000. This is a quote from my local Audi supplier, $23,000. Get that in, dear.
You know, it's funny, I went into this thinking, yeah, these are a super sexy car, and I've always loved the driving experience of the first generation R8, but it is an aging Audi, and as we found time and time again with our videos, aging Audis often equate to reliability nightmares. Don't go getting your hopes up. I'm really happy to say I was wrong. Obviously the R8 isn't perfect, and examples lacking a perfect service history or showing any signs of abuse or neglect are to be avoided at all costs. But with the R8 being an extremely premium and much loved car, there's no shortage of pristine used examples with faultless maintenance histories out there. This wasn't just a flagship car for Audi, this was an indicator of what the company could achieve, and it had to do that while providing the basis for the highest selling of Lamborghini's supercars. And with this, yeah, you can tell. See, Audis often feel like rebadged Volkswagens with just a dollop more leather, but with the R8, this is an incredibly special thing, and if you can find the right one, yes, you should buy one, because surely this thing is a future classic. Just make sure you can afford to keep it at its best and make sure it's the right R8, but yeah, you should buy one. However, do you potentially save yourself a whole boatload of cash and maybe buy another potential future classic like one of these? But if you weren't to buy that or this, what would you buy? Let us know in the comments. See you next time. Now the specialist, now interestingly, unlike a whole bunch of other Volkswagens and Audis of this sort of generation, oh my God, mate, here we go. Now interesting,